This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
1 year ago, Brian Thompson was shot in the back on a Manhattan sidewalk. 5 days later, Luigi Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, with a ghost gun in his backpack and a manifesto in his notebook. And right now, while most people aren't paying attention, lawyers are fighting over whether they'll have any of that evidence in court, whether we'll ever see a jury. Kind of important stuff when you're talking about, capital murder. This is the suppression hearing that's going on right now. It started not that long ago. It's continuing on. It resumes. And what happens in that courtroom could gut the prosecution's case before it's ever at trial, depending on what a judge decides. So here's what you need to understand. A suppression hearing isn't about guilt or innocence. It's about whether evidence was collected legally. The defense is arguing that Altoona police questioned Mangione for 20 minutes before reading him his rights and searched his backpack without a warrant. If the judge agrees, prosecutors lose the gun, the manifesto, and every statement Mangione made, which is kind of a big deal. You can't convict someone with evidence the jury never sees. And this again goes back to why good policing is important. Training them appropriately before they get out there and know how to do their job effectively, because all this affects the court case. And if we're just throwing people out there to the wind and then going, I wonder why they did a horrible job on this. How were they trained? So what exactly happened this week? Well, for the first time, we heard the 911 call that ended the manhunt. It wasn't a tip from the FBI. It wasn't sophisticated surveillance. It was a woman eating breakfast who thought the guy at the corner table looked like the shooter on TV. She told the manager, and the manager called 911. I have a customer here that some other customers were suspicious of that looked like the CEO shooter from New York. Think about that. Mangione's face was everywhere for 5 days. The FBI had clear images, and not one person from his family, his prep school, his Ivy League network picked up on the phone. A stranger in Pennsylvania at a McDonald's did what everyone who knew him wouldn't. Then we saw the body camera footage. Officer Detweiler responds to the call, doesn't really believe it's the guy. His boss jokes about buying him a hoagie if it is. Mangione sitting at the back table eating his hash brown. Christmas music is playing. Detweiler asks him to pull down his mask. I knew it was him immediately. Now Detweiler's standing next to someone who believes just assassinated his CEO, and he keeps calm, whistles Jingle Bell Rock, makes small talk. Tells Mangione they're just verifying his ID. Meanwhile, backup is flooding the parking lot. 13 officers eventually show up, nearly half the shift. Mangione hands over a fake ID. Mark Rosario, same alias he used at the New York hostel. But the second an officer warns him about consequences for false identification, he gives up his real name. No fight, no story, just, I'm Luigi Mangione. He tells officers about a knife in his pocket they missed during the pat-down. He asks why so many cops are showing up. He never reaches for the backpack with the gun inside. And here's a moment that matters. On the body cam, an officer says words to the effect of, at this point, we probably need a search warrant. And then they search anyway. Just can't resist. And that's the defense's case right there on tape. What about that backpack? A 3D printed gun, ballistics matched to it, to the shell casings from the crime scene, a homemade silencer, a red notebook, the manifesto, handwritten pages about the healthcare industry, about targeting a CEO at an investor conference, reportedly praising Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, over $7,000 in cash, foreign currency, multiple fake IDs, and a laptop, like you have at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, as you're eating a hash brown. And in his pockets, they find a to-do list dated December 8th to the 9th, the day before and the day of his arrest. Items included digital cam, survival kit, and trash bags. That's the prosecution's case. The gun is the murder weapon. The notebook is a motive. The to-do list and the fake ID show planning and intent to flee. Every piece, it connects. If it gets thrown out, prosecutors are left with surveillance footage and fingerprints on a water bottle. Maybe that's enough for a conviction. Maybe it's not. But it's a completely different case, one where the jury never learns why Luigi Mangione did what he did, because they never would see what he wrote. There's also a testimony from corrections officers at the Pennsylvania prison where Mangione was held after his arrest. A guard named Thomas Rivers was assigned to watch him around the clock. He testified the prison didn't want an Epstein-style situation over 16 hours. Rivers said Mangione was constantly at his cell door wanting to talk. Healthcare systems, his travels to Thailand and Vietnam, literature. He recommended Aldous Huxley. You know, like you do when you're a narcissist behind bars. Another guard, Matthew Henry, claims Mangione volunteered unprompted that he had a 3D printed gun in his backpack. The defense attacked Henry's credibility. He never wrote it down, never told anyone until prosecutors interviewed him months later. Mark Agnifilo asked if Mangione really just blurted out that he had a gun. But here's the thing about suppression hearings. Even if the judge lets this testimony in, the defense has now locked these witnesses into their stories. Every inconsistency, every gap in memory, every detail they couldn't recall, it's all on the record now for cross-examination at trial. And this is just the state case. Luigi Mangione is being prosecuted in 3 jurisdictions. Count them 3, Bob. What's behind door number 1? New York State, second-degree murder, weapons, charges, the terrorism counts were already tossed in September. Judge Caro ruled that there wasn't enough evidence. Mangione intended to intimidate the public or influence policy. Maximum sentence is life in prison. That's where tomorrow's hearing, or that's where the hearing this week is going. Federal murder through use of a firearm, stalking, death penalty is on the table. Attorney General Pam Bondi directed prosecutors to seek it in April, calling the killing a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination and tying it to President Trump's agenda. The defense says local federal prosecutors didn't recommend death, that the order came from Washington. Next hearing on that, January 9th. Pennsylvania, charges from the arrest itself on hold while New York proceeds. 3 systems, 3 sets of prosecutors, 1 defendant in Brooklyn Detention Center, waiting to find out which one decides his fate. It'll be a nice little mix of all of them, really, at the end of the day. And then there's the political circus. Trump called Mangione a pure assassin on Fox News. The White House posted the clip. A DOJ official reposted it. The defense is arguing this taints the case. DOJ filed a 121-page response saying pretrial publicity isn't a constitutional problem. Meanwhile, Mangione supporters have raised over $1 million for his defense. They're camping outside the courthouse wearing Free Luigi shirts, treating him like he's a folk hero, while Brian Thompson's family spends their first Christmas without a father and a husband who paid the ultimate price for being a successful CEO. Now, look, there's a lot to say about the healthcare system and a lot of bullshit, without a doubt. I've dealt with it personally myself. It is corrupt as fuck. And things need to change. And people need to be removed. Not necessarily from the planet, although the healthcare system does seem to decide that on its own now, doesn't it? It's like, well, we're not going to cover you. This is going to make someone die. You do realize that. Well, are they in network? You want to change that? Change the people you elected who allow this shit to go on. Vote for better choices. That's how you fix this. You don't fix it by executing CEOs on a sidewalk. Because we are in a capitalist society, like it or not. If you don't, well, there's plenty of other places that don't have that. And if you don't like it, you don't have it. But that's how we operate here. At least it's how we have. It's kind of just the precedent we have going on. And if you don't like that, well, then you got to vote to change it. And some people are. But here's the reality. in a capitalist society, the companies, again, I'm not saying this is right. I'm just telling you how it will work. So don't be surprised when it does. They will operate within the rules that the government has set for them. And they are currently operating within those rules. They're shitty. They do allow insurance companies to basically be the grim fucking reaper at their own discretion by denying coverage or service at their will without much oversight. And if you really want to fight it, well, you can appeal it. You can do this. And then, by the way, someone's dead before it actually gets appealed. So, yes, I understand the frustration and wanting to see some horrific repercussions for the fuckers in these companies that allow these sort of things to happen and take place. I get it. But this is not the way to fix the problem. Because you knock down one, guess what? There's another person that's coming up to take that same job. And it will continue to keep happening until the company is forced not to do business that way. That is through laws. So start voting for better people. People with spines. People that don't just speak in TikTok bumper sticker fashion and go, well, they said this, I'm going to believe that and not do any start educating yourself, because right now it's a great reflection of our society, uneducated and dumb as fuck. You may not be, but take a look around you. Do you think people are making good choices because they've educated themselves? There's a good chunk of people who have, and a good chunk who don't, and a good chunk who can't, and a good chunk who didn't even understand what that concept is all about. So, you want changes? That's how you do it. This is not the way. Finding a GoFundMe for a narcissistic, grandiose 20-some-year-old is not your freaking ticket to fixing problems. Brian Thompson was a public school kid, went to Iowa State, worked his way up for 20 years. He was a father to two. You think those little kids understand the inner workings of United Healthcare? They know dad's dead. And they know there's a bunch of assholes out there that are trying to put their pennies towards making his killer go free. Not really a way to handle things. So people can feel good about cheering for the man who shot him in the back. The anger at the healthcare system is real, but it found a strange vessel in a wealthy prep school kid who never struggled for coverage a day in his life. The hearing continues. More officers will testify at some point. Judge Carl will rule on what evidence stays and what goes. If the backpack evidence survives, the state case moves forward as planned. If it gets thrown out, prosecutors face a choice. Go to trial with what's left or hope the federal case with its different judges and different standards can carry the weight. Either way, we're probably looking at 2026 before any trial begins or later. 1 year later, Brian Thompson is still dead. 1 year later, there is still no trial date. And whether his killer is held accountable may come down to whether some small-town cops should have waited for a warrant before opening a backpack. Your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. Would love to hear it. While you're there, be sure to press subscribe so you don't miss our coverage of this and the many cases we're watching for you right here. Until next time, I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.